Earlier, I spoke to Richard Burge, CEO of the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry, about the Chancellor's speech. I asked him how slow the recovery from COVID and Brexit might be.
Yes, I think we're into long COVID and long Brexit. I wish the Chancellor, if he'd known it was going to be like this, had told everyone in advance and we could have prepared ourselves for it. But it seems to have come, frankly, as a surprise both to government and to all of us that we've got fuel and supply chain shortages, we have inflation rising, and we have massive staff shortages across all industries, especially in hospitality and in agriculture.
You mentioned the supply chain shortages in the UK, some of those being put down to Brexit. But the Chancellor also said that Brexit is in the long-term interests of the country. So what's the business community's view?
Well, I think business communities are worried much more about surviving the short term at the moment. It's all very well, the Chancellor suggesting that we have long-term bright sunlit uplands. We have to find a path to getting there. And at the moment, most businesses just don't think as though feel as though they've got a pathway to those bright sunlit uplands of a Brexit Britain. What they want to know is how do they get their goods now, which are currently not being shipped to the UK? How do they actually get fuel into their vehicles, which apparently is not a problem on mainland Europe? And how do they ensure themselves against rising costs and inflation and the potential for interest rises as well?
There was also a promise not to allow more immigration to stop those shortages. But is the model of a high wage and higher skill economy realistic?
We'll have to see. I mean, a higher wage economy means higher costs of goods, higher costs of services. It means inflation. It is as simple as that. But also, it's not necessarily so that higher wages will bring in more people. Many of the jobs we have with vacancies in are pretty well paid. So where are they going to come from? They're going to come from people shifting from one job to another because it's better paid. We've already seen this. With the HGV sector, where people have moved out of HGVs into higher paying careers in something else because the money's turned up. I mean, inflating wages doesn't necessarily create more skilled workers.
What would business like to see now? What would make the most difference?
Well, I think government's got to pull the levers it can. I think retaining as much business support in place. I mean, removing some of the tax incentives on, for instance, VAT for eating in and other things should be left in place. Maybe furlough should be extended for some of those businesses in the very high pressure areas. But it also does mean opening up our borders significantly more than we've got at the moment. We're not asking for open borders and a free-for-all. The Prime Minister seems to think that it's either open borders or very, very tiny immigration allowances. No, there is a middle ground, which is supply and demand. And at the moment, there is demand and there is no supply.
And listening to the speech from Rishi Sunak today, he talked a lot about the future, perhaps positioning himself as a future leader of his party or potentially Prime Minister. Would business welcome a change now?
No, I think business just wants government policy to be consistent and effective and pragmatic and have foresight. Frankly, who delivers that is not important.